Welcome to Embedded Edge with Nitin, a podcast that brings to life the stories behind today's embedded systems, technologies, and products. It's the show where you'll hear from both engineers and executives on some of the most topical news and most pressing challenges in the world of embedded system design. Here's your host, Nitin Dahad.
Welcome to this edition of Embedded Edge. My name is Nitin Dahad, and I'm talking today to Sivaram Trikutam, who's the Vice President of the Wi-Fi product line at Infineon Technologies. Sivaram, hello.
Hi, Nitin. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on your show.
So what I'm actually going to do, you've got over 25 years of experience in semiconductor marketing and product line management with a strong technical background. So I'm going to test that technical background today and talk about Wi-Fi 6. We're talking about it a lot today. It's been around for a while. Why are we talking specifically more about it now? Just give us some context.
Sure. Yes, Wi-Fi 6 has been around for over 4 years now, but we need to put this in some context, right? So if you go back, in fact, incidentally, Wi-Fi is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And over the last 25 years, as a technology, Wi-Fi has had a phenomenal ride, right? It's always predicted the needs of the market in advance and evolved in a way that it served the needs of the market very well. So back 25 years ago, those of your audience who's old enough to remember the mid 90s and when the popularity of the internet was growing across the world, the way we used to access the internet was by sitting at our desks, on our laptops, on our PCs, and we used to plug in either an Ethernet cable or like a dial-up, for a connection to a dial-up modem. So what that meant was you were limited to sitting in one corner of your house, wherever that was, right? And you couldn't walk around your house while you did this. And Wi-Fi in the late 90s, when it got invented, it untethered us from that study or that desk. You could sit anywhere in the home. You could sit in your living room. You could sit at your kitchen table and access the internet, browse the web, check your email, order things on the net, and so on and so forth. So it's a technology that really untethered us, and it's the same user experience in offices. You didn't have to sit at your desk. You could walk to a meeting room and so on. So in the early days of Wi-Fi, and I remember the first time I actually went to a Starbucks coffee shop more than 20 years ago and accessed the internet for the first time from a coffee shop. It was an incredible experience being able to do that, right? So the need then, though, was to increase the data rate, right, at which you could access the internet at. It's like, the invention of the first car, right? It was a cool new invention. You could get around, but it only went at 10 miles an hour. It needed to increase the speed.
Well, I don't know if you remember a thing called WAP, which basically was yes. So slow. In today's standards, you just think, you can't even download anything.
Yeah, you have to wait minutes for something to happen, right? And
exactly.
So the first few generations of Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is numbered now for its generations. It didn't used to be back then. But if you look back and what we might now call Wi-Fi 1, 2, 3, the first three generations of Wi-Fi, the focus was all about increasing the data rate, right? And we went from 2 megabits per second to 11 megabits per second to 54 megabits per second in those first three generations. And the way we did that is, you alluded to my technical background, so let me try some of my technical chops still, right? There's this beautiful information theorem from Shannon. It's called the Shannon's theorem, right? Which is fundamental for all information theory, which in its very simplistic form states that for a certain channel bandwidth at a certain distance, there's a certain maximum amount of data you can transmit through that channel. That's the physics of it, right? Okay. So if you have a 20 megahertz channel like Wi-Fi used to have, when it started out, at a certain distance, there's only so much data you can transmit through it. And the first few generations of Wi-Fi also coincided with the silicon technologies evolving, going from 0.35 micron to 0.18 micron to 90 nanometer and so on. And with subsequent generations, you could pack in more signal processing into the chips. So you could do more and more complex modulation techniques and so on to squeeze out a little more bandwidth with each successive generation. And that's what happened from Wi-Fi 1 to 3, increasing data rates. But even then, there were other user experience issues. Like you might remember this. While you could sit anywhere in your home and access the internet, it wasn't really anywhere in your home. There used to be spots where the Wi-Fi doesn't work here. I need to move back in in range and so on.
So there used to be many more not spots than hot spots.
Yeah. So Wi-Fi saw the need for that, right? I mean, this is the beauty about Wi-Fi as a technology. It saw the evolving needs and reacted, right? So then came Wi-Fi 4, which was a phenomenal, big new milestone for Wi-Fi because it introduced a new technique called MIMO, which stands for multiple input, multiple output. So instead of having just one antenna on the device, you could have more than one antenna. Now, when you use more than one antenna, it's not just that you increase the data rate, which you do, right? But you also use these clever mathematical properties, right, where a single signal is split on two antennas. You send some part of the signal on one antenna, another part on another, and you combine them in a certain way at the receiver. And the long and short of all of that is it enhances the range at which you could operate Wi-Fi, not just the absolute range, but also at a given distance. How do you improve the data rate? So that kind of Wi-Fi untethered you. It allows you to now move to different parts of the house better and get increased data rates. So Wi-Fi 4 was a big step forward. You might also say it kind of enabled the early generations of IoT devices when devices other than computers started getting enabled with Wi-Fi, like devices like printers and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Then came the streaming services, the Netflixes and the Hulus and so on in the early 10s, right, where those started getting popular. And there was a need not just for higher data rate, but consistent data rate, because that's what you need for video. You don't want to buffer lots of videos. You need consistent. So that needed new techniques. So Wi-Fi 5 was an incremental evolution. It added a few more techniques called beamforming, which allowed you to get consistently high data rates at a certain distance, and that enabled us to watch videos better, right, in our homes and so on. Around about this time, right, in the about 10 years ago, is when the number of devices started proliferating in a home, right? The number of devices with Wi-Fi. You started getting that was the early days of IoT. You had video doorbells starting out around that time, and cameras and other sorts of devices getting Wi-Fi. So the problem was soon changing from data rate to be able to handle multiple devices in a network. And why is that? And that's because of the way Wi-Fi operates, right? When I say Wi-Fi 4 is 600 megabits per second, it's important to note what that 600 megabits per second means, right? It's the theoretical maximum data rate you can get, which means if you have no other Wi-Fi networks in the vicinity, it's just one device connected to one access point, then the maximum you could get is 600 megabits per second. Right?
And in the consumer world, there's some people understand that as contention.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but the way the contention works is also interesting. When you have, let's say you move from one device in that example I gave, the theoretical maximum, you go to two devices, you don't get half each. You get slightly less than half because you lose some bandwidth. And as you keep adding devices, right, the inefficiency of the network does not scale linearly. It grows on approximately a square function. So when you move from, let's say, 10 devices to 20 devices, the congestion doesn't double, it quadruples, or the inefficiency due to the congestion quadruples.
Yes.
So it doesn't scale very, very nicely, right? That was the problem with Wi-Fi. And the underlying technique there, if I might use a simple analogy to describe that, is if you're designing a traffic system in a small residential neighborhood, like at least here in the US, you have a four-way stop sign, right? And the rules are very simple. Everybody stops at the stop sign before you go through the intersection. Whoever comes first goes first. Yep. If two people come at the same time, the person on the right goes first. Simple rules to share the intersection. Wi-Fi operates somewhat similarly. Simple rules like that. Everybody follows those rules, and you share the medium. But now, what happens if the same residential neighborhood has a lot of cars, right? It's not like one every 1 minute or so, but a lot of cars. It becomes very inefficient. Then it's time to install a traffic light, because that's more efficient. Then you can also control the traffic light. In peak hours, maybe you need to have more green time in one direction because there's more traffic going one particular way, and so on. You get the ability to moderate traffic more intelligently by installing a traffic light.
Yes.
That's exactly what happened in Wi-Fi from when it moved from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6. So Wi-Fi 6 is again a big new step in the evolution of Wi-Fi, where the channel access mechanism fundamentally changed. A new technique called OFDMA got introduced, where a combination of OFDMA and the scheduling algorithms allows you to more gracefully manage the increasing number of devices on a network, so they're not stepping on each other and everybody gets a fair share and the inefficiency is managed. Now, Wi-Fi saw that problem coming and brought this technology. And you started out by asking why we're talking about Wi-Fi 6 now. It's been 4 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's because now is when the problem is actually being felt in most places, where we used to have 5 to 10 devices per home. It started getting 15 to 20, and now a lot of people have more than 20, and some of the lead adopters even have 30 to 40. Actually, let me ask you, how many Wi-Fi devices do you have, Nitin, in your...
So I did have a look on and I think I've got 39.
There you go. Okay. So you're one of the reasons why Wi-Fi 6 was invented, right? I mean, people, once they start adopting 30, 40, 50 devices, for all these devices to play nicely with each other, you need a fundamentally different access mechanism.
So, I mean, was it last year when I installed a Wi-Fi 6 router onto my broadband? I think that improved my coverage as well as ability for all these devices to do what they need to do.
There you go. So you're already feeling the impacts of it.
Exactly.
I did a little poll on amongst my LinkedIn connections recently, asking them how many devices do people have. It's an interesting histogram. There are still about 50% of the people who responded said they have under 20 devices. The other 50% had over 20, some over 30. So we know which direction this is going. More and more devices are getting connected.
But I think people don't also realize, some people don't count things which are connected, which they don't realize is connected. And I think that's key. It's now hidden connections because it's, as you said, it's in many more devices in terms of connectivity, in terms of IoT.
Yeah. I mean, I play this little game usually with, in the sense, the way I ask people I meet is I ask them, why don't you take a guess how many Wi-Fi devices are in your router? And they usually guess a number. And then I ask them to itemize them and start counting. 9 times out of 10, people under-report the numbers. And they that one also has Wi-Fi, and there's more than what they think they had.
Exactly. So Wi-Fi 6, we're talking about it now because of its ability to deal with multiple devices. Just tell us a little bit what are the things it does in terms of helping with crowded networks. Sure.
So, like I said earlier, the key evolution for Wi-Fi 6, of course, there are many aspects about Wi-Fi 6.
I think you said the OFDMA, so yeah.
Yeah, the OFDMA is one aspect where instead of having the entire, I talked about channel bandwidth earlier. Let's say you're operating at 160 megahertz or 80 megahertz. Up until Wi-Fi 5, the way that worked is the entire 80 megahertz is used by one device at a time, right? So if device 1 is accessing the network, it uses the entire 80 megahertz, whether it has need for it or not, until it's done with using the spectrum, and then you move on to the next device using those 80 megahertz. OFDMA is this interesting technique where that 80 megahertz can be chunked up into smaller pieces. Let's say 4 devices could be using 20 megahertz worth of the channel at the same time, right? Now, that obviously cannot work with the previous types of channel access mechanisms that we had in Wi-Fi 5. Here, the access point has to coordinate that. So the access point, to my analogy earlier, is the traffic light, which coordinates the traffic and says, okay, you use 420 megahertz channels, you go now. Then move to the other. Okay, you 2 devices, you go now. The access point plays the role of that coordinator of the network, thereby improving the network efficiency. Now, one thing to keep in mind is Wi-Fi is backwards compatible. So Wi-Fi 6 is backwards compatible all the way to Wi-Fi 1, right? So while Wi-Fi 6 has these benefits, there are legacy devices from Wi-Fi 5, 4, which are still connected to these new Wi-Fi 6 access points. And the more legacy devices you have on the network, the less the benefits of Wi-Fi 6 are, even though you've installed a Wi-Fi 6 network. So the reason why it's relevant to talk about it today is as the number of devices grow, if they grow in a direction where they all adopt the new Wi-Fi 6 standards, on an average, the network will behave much better, right? If you still have a lot of legacy devices, even though Wi-Fi 6 has these benefits, you don't accrue the full benefits of Wi-Fi 6 because of the legacy devices on the network.
And to enable the Wi-Fi 6 in these devices, I mean, you have to upgrade. There's no sort of over-the-air updates or things like that, because I think you have Wi-Fi 6 specific chips to manage those Wi-Fi 6 features. Is that right?
Exactly right. Yeah, each of these big generations, whether it's, like I said, Wi-Fi 4 was a big new step forward, Wi-Fi 5 incremental, Wi-Fi 6 another big step forward. All of these need new silicon, new chips to enable it. It cannot be done with just software.
Okay. What are the other things, the benefits? I mean, I guess a lot of people listening to this podcast will be designing embedded products, they'll be designing IoT products. So they'll be looking for, low power implementations. What are the factors that they should be considering when choosing what kind of Wi-Fi or less than Wi-Fi, it's more the connectivity that they need to be putting in there.
Yeah. So as the usage of Wi-Fi is now growing, right, beyond the traditional devices of laptops and smartphones and so on, I mean, let's look at what kinds of devices these are, right? There are things like, I mean, what people refer to as the smart home. Your door locks are getting connected. The thermostat is connected. The smoke detector is connected. You have security cameras around your house. You have video doorbells. You have chimes in your house. You have robotic vacuum cleaners that go around your house that are connected. Appliances are connected. It's quickly adding up. I mean, this is like 20, 30 devices. Now, one of the things in which the nature of connectivity for these devices is different is the traditional devices, smartphones and laptops and so on, are usually living room experiences. You're in the living room or in your bedroom, in those parts of the house. Whereas these devices that I just mentioned that are getting connected, they're sometimes in the far corners of the house. They're in basements. They're outside the house and so on and so forth. So the need for the type of connectivity they need is a little different. They may not need a lot of data rate, but they need reliable connectivity in all these corners of the house, not so easily accessible parts of the house and so on. So that's one thing Wi-Fi 6 does well, where it enhances the range of the Wi-Fi networks, right? It has some techniques built in there. And again, range, it needs to be viewed in two ways. There's the uplink, which is from the device to the access point, and the downlink, which is the access point to the device. The access points are typically plugged in. They have access to a lot of power. They can blast the signal out very loud, so they can reach. But these tiny devices that are sitting in all corners of your house, being able to transmit back and be heard by the access point, that's the general challenge. So Wi-Fi 6 has some techniques like legacy preamble boost and so on that enhance that part of the link, right? So that
the uplink. Okay.
The uplink, yeah. So if you're an embedded designer, you're designing a new IoT product. If this product is like a video doorbell or an outdoor camera, one of these types of or like a robotic vacuum cleaner that goes into the far corners of your house under the bed, if it has any of these properties, you might want to consider the range enhancing features of Wi-Fi 6. You also mentioned battery operated device, some of these outdoor cameras and so on. Yep. There's no place to go run a power cable there. Ideally, you want something that's battery operated, because you want to have the camera where you have the best view of whatever you want to look at and not be limited by where you have access to a power socket. So these are battery operated devices, and battery operated devices, naturally, the key care about is battery life. And these are devices that, like if I continue with the example of the camera in the backyard, we don't use the camera all throughout the day, right? We might use it like 5 or 10 times in a day to check what's going on in the backyard. But they need to stay connected 24/7. They need to stay connected all the time, right? So in anticipation of you wanting to see your backyard view at some point. So the power that the device burns in the act of staying connected, that's an important consideration for devices like that. Now, before Wi-Fi 6, the way the devices could sleep, right? I mean, this is basically a sleep mode. You're sleeping, waiting for something to trigger you. There were certain limits to how long you could sleep. Wi-Fi 6 has a cool new feature called TWT, target wake time, which allows you to increase the amount of time you could sleep by a big order of magnitude. You could even sleep minutes now or even hours, right? I mean, depending on the nature of the device. I mean, of course, with a camera, you wouldn't want to sleep hours because if I click on my phone app and I want to see the backyard view, I want the response time to be of the order of a few seconds. But even seconds was not possible before Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 can do that and enhance the battery life. So if you have a product that you're designing where you care about battery life, it stays connected all the time, you might want to consider the power saving features of Wi-Fi 6 for your next design.
It sounds like that Wi-Fi 6 or 6E is a solution for everything. You don't really need to be looking at any of the others.
That's actually true. I mean, Wi-Fi 6 has a little bit in it for everything. It enhances range. It improves performance when you're operating with various interfering networks, because the 30 to 50 devices per house I talked about earlier, that problem is not just about your house. Your neighbor is also going to have 30 to 50 devices. And your neighbor on the other side is also going to have 30 to 50 devices. So their Wi-Fi is going to interfere with your Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi 6 has, again, features which can help combat interference from neighboring networks very effectively. So high level, you're right, Nitin. I mean, Wi-Fi 6 is such a big step forward that it's got all these cool new things which help with range, which help with reliability, which help with congestion, which help with power. There's something in it for everyone in this technology.
And what's the difference between 6 and 6E? I mean, we've referenced them both like together, collectively. There's obviously an additional difference between 6 and 6E.
Yeah, I should have clarified that. In fact, there's a big difference between the two. So up until Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi started out, when it started out as Wi-Fi 1, it used to operate in just 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, which is very crowded spectrum, very limited spectrum. Then we expanded it into 5 gigahertz spectrum, right? So up until Wi-Fi 5, we could use 2.4 or 5, including Wi-Fi 6, you could use either 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. Wi-Fi 6E was the first time we expanded into a brand new spectrum in the 6 gigahertz domain. And this was opened up for Wi-Fi for the first time. Unlike 2.4 and 5, which are pretty much global at this point, all countries allow it. Wi-Fi 6 is relatively new. Well, it's not that new. It's about 3 to 4 years old now. And over 50 countries by my last count already allow Wi-Fi 6E, and all the major, 80% of the world's GDP, the countries covering 80% of the world's GDP already allow the 6 gigahertz spectrum. So this is brand new spectrum. So very low congestion in that area. And the other good thing is in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, you still have all the legacy devices that I alluded to earlier, the Wi-Fi 1s and the 2s and the 3s and the 4s and so on. With Wi-Fi 6E, the bar is high. You can't use the 6 gigahertz spectrum unless you're a Wi-Fi 6 device. That's the minimum bar to be on Wi-Fi 6. So it's only these super efficient devices, right, which conform to the high efficiency protocols of Wi-Fi 6 can operate in Wi-Fi 6E. So that makes for a really good user experience, particularly with respect to congestion and with respect to latency. Any application that is latency sensitive, 6E is a great technology for it.
Okay, so you need to be more selective about where you choose 6 versus 6E when you're designing. And so what are the typical sort of things you might want to sort of say, well, I don't really need 6E, I'll do 6. Or, there's a specific application where I do need 6E because I need that reliability.
Yeah. So good question. So with Wi-Fi 6, we talked about crowded networks. So if your device is going to operate in a crowded network or likely to operate in a crowded network, you need to be on Wi-Fi 6. Now, beyond that, if you think the crowding is beyond a certain level with lots of legacy devices also in that network, and your product performance depends on certain kind of latency that is required for a good user experience, you should go to Wi-Fi 6E. An example, there could be many, but I'll try a few, right? Is if let's say there's a device that's doing video conferencing, like your speakerphone that's on Zoom or WebEx or one of these kinds of audio conferencing systems, latency is very critical for something like that, right? You might want to think of Wi-Fi 6E for a device of that nature. And there are many others that...
High performance gaming headsets and things like that, I guess.
Yeah, headsets, anything to do with media, audio, streaming audio to multiple speakers in a house, all these kinds of applications would benefit from Wi-Fi 6E.
This whole conversation makes me think of analogies in the mobile space as well. It's quite interesting we're having this conversation. Let's move on. Can you summarize the three key reasons a designer needs to consider Wi-Fi 6 or 6E?
Yeah, sure. So at a high level, the user experience of most of the new devices that are getting Wi-Fi, and I talked about all the home automation devices, for them to have a good user experience, which is range, reliability, and ability to withstand interference, that's a reason why you should be thinking of Wi-Fi 6. The second is power. If you have battery operated devices, particularly those that stay connected throughout the day but are used intermittently, the power saving features of Wi-Fi 6 are a great advantage. And the last, we talked about 6E, which is if device or application is sensitive to latency, and you need it to be as low latency as possible and avoid the congestion of 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, Wi-Fi 6 is the technology to consider. So there are three big: rate, range, and reliability, low power for battery life, and low latency for a better user experience. So those are the top three reasons.
Does security and privacy come into it at all?
Sure. So security and privacy are evolving standards. I mean, from Wi-Fi 4 to 5 to 6, the security level kept improving, right? And it's going to improve further as well. So, but the way security works is like the latest security standard, which is WPA 3, right, is required even for Wi-Fi 5 devices now. So the way Wi-Fi views security is it's not optional. You have to have the latest technology, otherwise you can't call it a Wi-Fi device, whether it's 5 or 6 or 7. I mean, there's the new standard now, 7. Any of these need to have a certain minimum quality of security, which is evolving, and it's mandatory, right?
Okay.
It's not optional.
It's baked in. Okay. So you mentioned Wi-Fi 7, so I was actually going to come on to the next question, which, well, you've already got Wi-Fi 7, the next generation. What is it? And should designers just consider that Wi-Fi 7 if they've got sort of longer term designs?
Yeah. So we said Wi-Fi 4 was like a big new step, and we said Wi-Fi 5 was an incremental thing. We've improved latency for streaming applications. Wi-Fi 6 we said was a big new leap because it had multiple facets. Now Wi-Fi 7 is the next step where it's a little more incremental in nature, in the sense that, I mean, it's a cool new technology, but the focus there is more about improving latency even further, right? It's an increasing data rate. And this is particularly useful for applications like VR, any kind of augmented reality, technologies, where you need the latency to be even lower, sub 5 milliseconds. And the way Wi-Fi 7 does that, right, is by introducing another new technology element called multi-link operation. So far, Wi-Fi has had just one link between a device and the access point.
Yes.
With Wi-Fi 7, you can have two links at the same time, right? And you could do that in multiple ways. You can think of these two links as an and or as an or, right? What I mean by that is, if you use it as an and, you could use both links simultaneously, increase your data rate. You're basically doubling, or I should say it's additive, the two A plus B, kind of a deal. Or you could view it as an or, which is I could use either link at a time. If let's say one link happens to be congested because somebody else is using it, I can use the other link. So thereby I reduce my latency, which is cool, right? These are cool new techniques. Now, of course, that comes with penalties with respect to power, with respect to the cost of the chip, because it's a more complicated piece of silicon and so on. So if you're designing a product that really cares about latency, the experiences I talked about, VR headsets and so on and so forth, Wi-Fi 7 definitely benefits you, and you need to start thinking about Wi-Fi 7. Now, that's the early adoption of Wi-Fi 7. Wi-Fi 7 is relatively new, so that's the accent. But in the longer term, right, which is, I'm talking about the next 2 to 4 years, there are other capabilities of Wi-Fi 7 that will get deployed, which will also have a role to play in the IoT types of devices. But that's coming. Today, the best technology for all the IoT type of devices we talked about is basically Wi-Fi 6 and 6E. And you could start building in Wi-Fi 7 some aspects, not the whole Wi-Fi 7, some aspects of Wi-Fi 7, maybe to have some future proofing for your designs.
Without laboring Wi-Fi 7 too much, I think, is that the standard is there, but there's still going to be a lot of work to be done on that in terms of certification and all that?
No, the certification program is actually
place.
done now. So there are
Okay.
the first Wi-Fi 7 devices, certified devices are out in the market. And as it happens with each new generation of Wi-Fi, the first devices that adopt a new technology like that tend to be the access points, the smartphones, and the PCs. So right now, it's in that phase of evolution where those are the primary devices that are, and again, not all of them, but a few of them have started migrating to Wi-Fi 7. In the next 3 to 4 years, we foresee those devices adopting more and more Wi-Fi 7. And beyond that time period would be the other devices, right? The IoT devices that'll start adopting it.
I think we've covered quite a lot, but are there any other developments you foresee for Wi-Fi and what it can do specifically for designers? Maybe some new technologies, not necessarily related to the standard.
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that because, aside from the standards evolution, of course, there's lots happening there. There's already some work happening even beyond Wi-Fi 7. But what I find interesting is the possibilities that Wi-Fi can do more than just data transfer. So today, Wi-Fi is used for basically transferring data, right? But there are some interesting new applications emerging, which are called Wi-Fi sensing, right? Which is using Wi-Fi to do things beyond just data transfer. You could use it, for instance, to do contextual awareness, right? And what I mean by that is, since Wi-Fi is ubiquitous, it's almost like a utility. Every home you go to, every office space you go to has Wi-Fi now. You could use Wi-Fi that's already installed, already available, to detect the presence of someone. Like, for instance, in a room, right? Is someone in a room now, right? That's contextual information. How many people are in a room?
So at the moment, that's kind of using radar or LiDAR and stuff like that, isn't it?
Exactly, and those are still good technologies, right? And it all depends on the quality of this detection, how you want to do it. So LiDAR, and they're expensive technologies, but they provide you such information at a very high quality for applications that need that quality. Some may not need that quality and can't afford that kind of a price point, right? Like, for instance, contextual information where knowing is somebody home, right? Now, if nobody's supposed to be home and you find somebody home, that's a security application. Maybe you have an intruder, or you want to know where are people in the house? If let's say everybody's sitting in the living room watching TV and there's nobody in the bedrooms, you could maybe turn off the air conditioning in the bedrooms and save some energy. So there's some contextual information that you could use to improve use case. Or if I'm in the living room, I'm listening to music, and I'm now walking into the bedroom, maybe the music can follow me. The speaker in the bedroom can start playing the same music or news or whatever I was listening to while I was in the living room. So these kinds of new use cases can get enabled through a technique called Wi-Fi sensing. And I'm excited about where that, it's still early days for that technology, but I'm excited to see where it takes us in terms of an industry and an ecosystem.
And is Wi-Fi sensing available now, or can I implement that in the design now?
You could start implementing. This is the early. Like I said, this technology still it's in early phases of development. It does work in some very well-defined, narrow use cases, but there's more evolution to happen there. There's a lot of research happening in this area for it to expand its scope of usage, right? Like, for instance, it might work very well in a small room now, but for it to be able to work in a bigger room, you need a little more improvement in that technology. So lead adopters are using it, but more to come in the next few years.
Okay. We kind of addressed this already, but if I have, as I said, 39 devices in my house, and it's probably growing, even with Wi-Fi 6 and 6E, how's it going to impact my Wi-Fi capability?
Yeah, it actually depends on how many of those devices are legacy devices, right? So, and legacy devices, they tend to get phased out over a period of time, right? It takes time. And as we progress through this evolution, right, as the legacy devices get phased out and more devices in your house are Wi-Fi 6 or 6E, the benefit, you'll start seeing the benefit. You see the benefits even today. Like you said, in your house, you're able to see the benefits. So you see those benefits even today. But those benefits are going to get even more pronounced. One, as the number of devices in your home increases. And two, the percentage of those devices being Wi-Fi 6 increases. When both those happen, you will see the benefits even more pronounced as time goes on.
So crystal ball time. What's next for Wi-Fi? We already talked about Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi sensing, but what do you see as coming up even beyond that?
You're going to see, firstly, we are going to see Wi-Fi in devices that we haven't thought of yet, right? So that's again to the topic of the number of devices, using Wi-Fi. So that's going to grow even more. And there are other enabling technologies. You might have heard of Matter, and there's a lot of talk around Matter that's gone on with. Basically, it's an ecosystem topic, right? Where I believe one of the ways in which the adoption of Wi-Fi devices will grow even further is, one, if you make it easy for people to use, and two, if you make it interoperable across ecosystem, right? And when I say easy, what I mean is this, right? And if you must have had experience with this. If you bring home a new IoT product, let's say video doorbell or a door lock, the amount of time it takes to install that device and onboard that device onto your network is still quite high. It's not very easy. It's not very intuitive. The various ways of doing it, you scan a QR code here, the product makes a chime, you download an app, a lot of different ways of doing this. Now, Matter is going to play a role there where it'll standardize the way we onboard these devices. It becomes more intuitive, easy for everybody. People who are not very tech savvy also to be able to use these devices. So there's going to be that improvement. Interoperability across ecosystems, right? I might have an Apple ecosystem or a Google or a Samsung or an Amazon ecosystem device in my house. And when I buy a new product, whether it's a camera or a doorbell, I don't want to be thinking about, okay, does this work with my HomePod or does it work with my Mini? Yeah, if once it supports Matter, it's just going to work with any device. So
that's the theory. That's the theory.
Yeah, they've already started. Matter has been around for 2 or 3 years. It started, but the growth is going to come in the next few years, where it'll become a de facto standard. And it will also improve the quality of security, because there's security that you need to add at various levels, not just at the level of Wi-Fi, but at a higher level, which makes the IoT product more secure, also deals with privacy better. So those are other evolutions that are happening here. So I foresee in the next, by the end of the decade, let's say, right, an average home in America, right, or any of the developed world, to have over 50 devices per home, right, because of all these enabling technologies.
So I'm already almost there.
Yeah, you're ahead of the curve.
Okay. Last question. Why do all the latest IoT and other devices need Wi-Fi? And I think the big issue is around, and we touched on this already, convenience and things like that. But for instance, why does my stove or my fridge need Wi-Fi?
Yeah, these are questions I ask people. When I'm talking to people, I ask them for their use case. It's amazing how everybody's circumstances in their lives are a little different. So everyone finds different uses for this, right? But all these tie into the convenience aspect, right? So your oven, for instance, why does my oven need Wi-Fi? Let's say I'm a busy parent, right? And I'm going to get home at 5. I need to get dinner ready. I've got the stuff. I've got food marinated sitting in the fridge. On my way home, I can use my phone app, turn on the oven. So by the time I get home, it's already at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I can get started with my dinner. You might think it's minor, but these are conveniences that for people in their circumstances in life can be a big improvement in their quality of life. That's one such example. And the same thing works for multiple other devices, like my doorbell. When I first installed my video doorbell, right, I was like, okay, I don't have to be home now. Somebody rings a bell, I can answer it from anywhere in the world, and I can talk to the person. I can tell the person at my door, leave something at my doorstep. When I didn't have this technology, I had to stop whatever I was doing, run back home and say, okay, I have to collect this or sign for something, so on and so. These are minor, what might seem like minor conveniences, but in totality, when you add up, make for an improved quality of life, right, by having these connected devices.
Sivaram, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nitin. It was a pleasure being on your show.